Eric never liked attics. Even as a kid, he hated them. Dark, cluttered places full of forgotten things. But when he moved into his late uncle's house, he had no choice but to clean it out. The attic smelled of dust and decay, boxes upon boxes, filled with things that had been untouched for decades. But one thing stood out. A VHS tape. No label, no markings. Just a plain black cassette sitting on top of an old TV set. Eric frowned. His uncle never owned a VCR, as far as he knew, but something about the tape bothered him. A weird, gnawing feeling in his gut. Still, curiosity won. That night, he dug out an old VCR from the attic, hooked it up, and pressed play. At first, the screen was black. Then, static. Then, footage. A dimly lit room. A wooden chair in the center. A single, flickering light bulb overhead. And then, Eric saw himself. Sitting in the chair. His breath caught. That wasn't possible. The man on the screen looked exactly like him. Same messy dark hair, same scar on his right eyebrow. But Eric had never seen this room before. Had never been there. Yet there he was. And then, his on-screen self lifted his head and looked directly at the camera. Eric's stomach twisted. The man on the screen smiled. But it wasn't his smile. It was wrong. Slow stretched, as if something else was using his face. Then, the screen went black. Eric barely slept. He told himself it was a prank, maybe an old home video his uncle had messed with, maybe a deepfake, something edited. But then he woke up to something even worse. The VHS tape was on his coffee table. He was sure, absolutely sure, he had left it in the attic. His hands trembled as he slid it into the VCR again. He had to see more. The footage started. Same room. Same chair. Same him. But this time, his on-screen self wasn't smiling. This time, he looked terrified. His lips moved, whispering something, but there was no sound. Then, his body jerked violently. Eric's breath hitched. His other self was struggling, as if someone or something was holding him down. Then he saw it. A shadow. Tall. Twisted. Standing behind him. And then, his own hand started moving. Eric's fingers twitched, mirroring the tip. He tried to stop, but his arms moved on their own. His on-screen self lifted his trembling hands, and so did he. A violent shudder ran through him. It was controlling him. He watched as his taped self clawed at his own skin, his own face. And suddenly, Eric felt it too. A sharp burning in his flesh. Like invisible hands forcing his fingers into his skin. Blood dripped onto the floor. He tried to scream, but his jaw locked. And on screen, his other self was laughing. Eric didn't touch the tape again. He tried to throw it away. Bonite smeshite. But every morning, it was back, sitting on the table. Waiting. And every night, the VCR turned on by itself. Every night, the tape played a new scene. And every night, it forced him to do worse things, tearing at his skin, cutting his arms, carving symbols he didn't understand into his chest. Until on the third night, his taped self spoke. Eric didn't want to listen, but he couldn't look away. The other him leaned closer to the camera, whispering, "You know what you have to do." Eric shook his head violently. "No." The figure on screen grinned. "You'll do it soon." Eric tried to shut off the TV, but the screen wouldn't turn off. His own reflection stared back at him. And this time, it wasn't moving the same way he was. Eric doesn't remember picking up the knife. Doesn't remember walking to the mirror. Doesn't remember ripping away his own face. But when he finally blinks, he's in the room. The dimly lit room from the tape. The wooden chair. The flickering light bulb. And across from him, someone else is watching. A new person. Sitting in their living room. Watching the tape. And Eric. Eric is grinning at them. Because now, it's their turn.